Riveter is a co-working space. We are also a community built by women for everyone. What that means is that we are inclusive to anyone who is an ally to helping everybody get a seat at the table. We have content, we have obviously co-working spaces, we do a lot of events around DE&I. This evening is very typical of the kinds of things that we do. We like to start conversations, we like to provide people with ideas, help them see other perspectives that are different than ours. And tonight, I'm so excited about this panel. Thank you so much for being here. We know that you have all sorts of things to be doing with your evening, so coming to support these amazing founders is wonderful. I won't talk to you for very much longer, but some of my favorite people are on this panel in our community. So again, thanks for being here. Janet,
Take it away.
take it away.
Can you all hear me? Is this good? All right, we'll use the mics. If we don't need them, we'll figure it out. Buenas noches, good evening. Estamos tan felices de estar en comunidad. We're so excited to build community. We have an amazing panel, and so I'm ready for y'all to meet them. I really like to facilitate making a little bit of a conversation. So as they're talking, if something comes up for you and you're just like, that's really something that's like present with me, and that's something I want to learn more, please, give me a sign. I'll find you. I'll see you. I'll be looking. And we'll bring you into the conversation. We don't need it to be Q&A, back and forth, like just a conversation up here. We want you in the room. We want you to be a part of this. I have a caveat though. This is an opportunity to learn from entrepreneurs and people who are out there right now. If you are in the audience and you want to pitch your idea and you want to sell the audience on your product, that's awesome. There's tables. You should definitely find some time to do that. But I really want you to stick to questions. The other thing sometimes some of my audience members do is they jump in and they want to share their story. We're all beautiful people. We want to hear everybody's story, but we also want to be conscious of the rest of the people in the audience who came here to hear certain perspectives. So please, if you jump in, be sure that it's a question and not a story, or just be conscious of how much time you take up, okay? The other thing too for my panel members, so similarly, if you've had the mic for 30 minutes and you realize that you've been talking for a while, you should probably pass the mic. So there's gonna be moments where you're feeling real passionate about the question. It's something that's really touching into your core, but let's be sure that we share the mic. The other thing too, for the benefit of the audience, I try to refrain from, one going down the line and then starting again and going back out in the order. So I'll ask some questions. The first question all of you will answer, but after that, just whatever calls you. It's something that really resonates with you. It's something that you want the audience to hear because it was something that was very transformational. Let's be sure to kind of bounce them up. So with that, I kind of want to bring the audience in already. So we'll start with introductions shortly, but I want to know who's in the room with us. So if you are an entrepreneur in the audience, can you raise your hand? Yes, all right. If you're an artist, that's me. If you're a scientist, yes, the scientists are like this. The artist was like, right? If you are a family member, yay. If you grew up in a family where it felt like everything was a side hustle, yes. It was like I was selling Cokes when I was like 56. And if you're here because you want to be inspired to take that leap, you want to put yourself out there. Yes, I love it. All right, so there's a good variety here in the room. I really appreciate you all for being here and making time for this. So with that, I want to turn it over to our guests. To start off, I would love for each of you to introduce yourselves. And when you introduce yourself, say what your business is, like what made you get started, and why you were willing to bet everything on it. So, who you are, what you do, why you risked it.
I feel like Leo should be first, but okay. I'm Sylvia Salazar, founder of Tono Latino, a progressive platform to encourage Latinos in the US to become more politically involved and vote. You can probably guess when I started this, but in case it's not super clear, it happened around January of the 2017. And I'm willing to risk everything because it is very important and it is affecting the Latino community very much, as well as other minorities. And I have never felt so passionate about anything in my entire life.
Except my husband, he's right there.
Okay. My name is Naya Zarati, and I founded Continuous Solutions. We are a research and development firm for electrification of land, sea, and aircrafts. I work mainly with the US government, and I started this in 2014. I'm extremely passionate about technology and moving technology forward as fast as possible. So I risked it all. In 2014, I was working at Intel, which is a very cushiony job, wonderful benefits, and still technically oriented. However, I decided to risk it all when I realized that there was a pathway forward to do independent research and get it sponsored by the government. So I'm extremely passionate to get technology to the forefront in society as fast as possible, and my passion lies at the intersection of government, academics, and industry.
I'm Paloma Medina. I own 1111 Supply. It's a retail store and also a training company. I started it a year and a half ago. The store opened a year ago. I risked it all so much. Okay, I risked it all because I changed careers about every 3 years. And each time I change, I kind of now try to pivot so that I'm not like leaving everything behind, like everything you work for. And I was ready for like a really big goal. I'm kind of into goals. The store and the workshops we do, so we know, are focused on the neuroscience and the psychology of how to make life better, including work. And so I'm like really into it. So I was like, what's the next big goal? And I love retail. I missed it. It's what I did, when I was really young. But I'm really passionate. I think a lot of people, because of all the neuroscience and psychology and the workshops we do, they really think that that's my main passion. But secretly, I think my biggest passion is retail. It's like these moments where strangers, anyone can walk into the door. Like if you build the right store, everyone feels welcome. And I think that is magical. That is very magical. And when they walk through the door, they can feel so loved and welcomed. You can do that for free. It costs you nothing. And I love retail. I love this like matchmaking with a product where you're just like, what's the secret, product that you've been waiting for? And it might just be a little pencil. It might be something more. I think that's my biggest passion. I love those moments, and it's cool that it's married with psychology and life improvement. So.
Hi, I'm Leo Ochoa. I'm the founder and CEO of Dorsum. We're solving the problem of back pain by creating a flexible exospine that integrates into apparel that you wear close to the body, so underneath your regular clothing. So I developed this awareness of this problem as a child. Watching my dad come home working in agriculture and having upper back, shoulder pain, lower back pain, and then my family not being able to afford healthcare. I didn't experience the problem until I was a wildland firefighter, carrying 45 pounds on my back up and down mountains. I then went to design school, and one of the projects was to design around healthcare. And I reimagined, or I did research with paramedics, city firefighters, and reimagined what a paramedic uniform should be with built-in back support. just noticing a lot of their stories, getting back injuries and being out of work. It reminded me a lot about my father's story. This then went on to receive many design awards, and I went to work. And over the years, I got emails from first responders all over the world saying they want to buy something like this because they want to return to work. And this looks like it's something that can help them. And I ignored it for about 4 years, and eventually the guilt got to a level where I just couldn't ignore it anymore. And I decided to just take the leap. I decided that this problem was big enough and worth solving. And I got a bit upset that no one or no other company was doing anything to really try to solve the problem. And I decided it's worth enough to risk everything. And then that's when I decided to go into entrepreneurship.
Thank you. Comunidad, we have really inspiring, really passionate people here in front of the room. I just want to express the gratitude of your courage and sharing your stories with us. Every person, when I was, doing some research, I was like, who am I talking to today? I was really moved by the service aspect and the commitment to filling gaps in community and to really, really bringing their lived experience. And that was something that, as a woman of color, to see people who are bringing their lived experience to drive solutions in a world that wasn't designed for us, is just really powerful. So we're in a really lucky space tonight. But I kind of want to hear a little bit about, there seems to be a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of people who are kind of getting ready in the room. So let's kind of dig into some of that a little more nitty gritty. There are a lot of surprises in entrepreneurship. You probably were surprised by something today. But for the audience and for folks who are kind of navigating this space, what was one of the aspects of starting your company that surprised you the most?
I'll start if no one. I think what surprised me the most is the amount of time it takes to build your product. I'm 2 years since I started my startup, 2.5 years into it, and we've made so many changes that we're just now getting ready to launch. And I thought this was something I can do in 1 year. So the amount of time and planning and testing that requires, it's what surprised me. Also the amount that I do less design now, and I started my company because I'm a product designer, I love design. And I thought I could design it and then sell it, but there's so many more components involved about building a business and a brand and a company. That's what really surprised me. There's so much that needs to be built along the way.
We were very lucky to get the questions ahead of time because I'm a slow reaction person. So I would think about the best answer 2 hours from now, and then I would be mad at myself for 3 days. So thank you, Tammy and Stephanie, for the questions. A lot of things surprised me, but one of the things that I really didn't expect was the emotional roller coaster, where you can be literally feeling the adrenaline, and you feel like a rock star, and then the next day you feel like what am I doing with my life? Why am I doing this? And it's so high, and I did not get on roller coasters, but it's the same feeling. Like you're just like up here one day, and then 2 days you're down here. Thankfully, another surprise is that, I don't know, God, destiny, whatever you believe in, this keeps happening to me, that when I'm like super, super, super low and I'm crying to my husband, like, why did I leave my job at Intel to do this? And I'm just like desperate. All of a sudden I get this random stranger say something on social media like, hey, I saw one of your videos and you're like Pod Save America, but with Spanish and a little salsa. And I'm like, what? Oh my God, thank you. And that will just like take me way up high again. And then just wait 2 days later and I'm gonna be crying.
Yeah, so I relate to both of your answers completely 100%. It takes so much work to get the company off the ground and so much passion, dedication from when I woke up to when I went to bed as how long I worked on my company for a year and a half straight. So that was intense and can cause a lot of burnout. So that was a big surprise is, you know, how much you need to take care of yourself during this process because it's so emotionally intense. Because you can attach your mental health to the outcomes that your company is producing. I think that that's a very slippery slope and should be always aware of, like you should always be aware of that and to try to put that degree of separation. It's a company, you are you. But that's, you know, 5 years in. My first 2.5 years, 3 years, it was very emotionally integrated with who I was. Another big surprise for me was, and still is just how much people want to help you and support you through these type of projects. You know, you're not in it alone. You have people who are there to support you, and they will always be there. So yeah, when I'm at my lowest lows, something happens where somebody comes through or I get an email and it's like, wow, I'm not alone and we're all in it together, so.
All right, so I'm really curious, you know, I'm gonna deviate from Tammy's suggested questions, but a lot of people are talking about the lows and this roller coaster ride, so I'm curious, just how do you take care of yourself? Like you said, you know, if you open your email and you see that you're not alone, or you know, you put in boundaries. But I think that in my experience, people talk a lot about work-life balance and boundaries, but we never say how or what that looks like or how you build community. So for those of us that are navigating the space and trying to figure it out, is there even just one thing that you've done? You know, like for me, it was I put in night lights in my rooms upstairs so that at night, like, I'm cued to go to sleep earlier. And that's actually been like, wow, revolutionary. I'm actually sleeping more because all of my lights are dimmed. But I don't know, it took me like 8 years to figure that one thing out. I was like, I've been sleeping for 8 years. So I'd love to hear if there's even just small things that you've done to put in place a boundary. It doesn't have to be revolutionary, but I think sometimes the small stuff goes a long way.
I can answer that one. I had a really rough August. I think I've had the roughest month in like years. I've built a few different businesses and this is probably the roughest month, was August. It's very fresh in my memory, what worked. There's a few things that I had already put in place that I was so thankful for when August hit and all these like string of really difficult things hit. Things like turning on, I forget the name on iPhones, where essentially just like shuts you off after a certain hour. It's just like, no, you can't use any of those apps anymore. And I was like, thank you. Like it was instantly just like anger and thank you, phone, for doing this. So definitely kind of kicking that back in. I knew how to use it. I knew how to like essentially make it earlier, have it turn on at 7 p.m. And how often I was like triggered that it wouldn't let me, told me, well, I'm way too used to this after 7. So that was really helpful. Little things like that. But I think the second thing was I had already, for the first year and a half of the store and everything, had my 3 people that either were also entrepreneurs and or I already had a kind of peer coaching relationship with. And one of them, we have every other week for the past 2 years maybe. We have a 1-hour call every other week. It's on the books, it's a recurring thing. She was in New York, she just recently moved here, it didn't matter. We have that call and we each get 30 minutes. And when August hit, I was like, I'm taking all of the time up. She was like, that's totally cool. And I was like, I need the whole hour. So there's all these little things. I really highly recommend that everyone have a peer coach. Just someone who's really, really good at letting you process and is not gonna give you advice. We don't need more advice. You don't need advice. you just need someone who lets you process. And highlights like, whoa, you've sold this before, how much you have sold it before, like stuff like that. Peer coach. But the thing that really helped as well was reconnecting with like the psychology of gratitude and bright spots. Bright spots are like when you're just like, yes, this thing was awful, but what's the one thing that really came through today? That, or like, what am I thankful for in all of this? And people was a big part. Like, how lucky is it that my husband happens to be a developer and could solve me fix this humongous travesty that happened from an engineering perspective? How lucky is that? And then like sit with it. Don't just be like, how lucky is it? Great, so great, and then like move on with your bad mood, but just be like, sit with it. Like, how lucky? You know? That would have been a shit show had he not happened to be this thing or whatever luck there is. So I think those few things I'm really thankful.
Yeah, so I have 4 ways of
Hey,
dealing
look at this. See, they're ready.
Yeah, because it happens for many reasons at different times. So when it's physical, when I just feel really stressed, and my body feels it, I go running. So I love running. That just gets my body moving, it just gets things flowing, you feel much happier. When it's more the social anxiety, and you feel like you're missing out on life, and you feel like your life is not normal, and you start to question that, then I turn to my family. But I had to coach them on how to give feedback. Because at first, when I was in design school, when I was thinking about entrepreneurship, I would call my mom, and then she would tell me, oh, well, you know, Mijo, you can stop. You don't have to do it. Like, you don't have to do it. You did your best. You can always go back to work. And I told her, no, this is not what I need to hear right now. It's like you're pushing me down even more. Like, unintentionally, you're discouraging me. I just need you to listen. And I just need someone to know what it feels like.
Yeah.
And then when it's a business decision and when like you spend money on a prototype and it breaks and it really hurts, because you're gonna have to redo it again and it's gonna take you more time. Then I know my family can't give me business advice. So then I turn to like a mentor, like someone or like another founder who's built a startup and has gone through similar emotions. But when I have those doubts, when you know you get some bad feedback or others question on like why do you work so hard, or this is never gonna happen, or why is it taking you so long? Then it kinda, if you're tired, it pushes you into a negative thought spiral. So I keep a binder of pictures and a binder of awards and emails I received from people in the past that have been interested in what I'm doing. Because since it takes so long to make things, I have to remind myself like, why it matters, why I took the leap, why I chose this path. And I have to kind of go back and hear these voices by reading emails. Then it gets me more motivated, like, okay, like I can do it, or this is the reason why I'm doing it. And this is why it matters, and this is why it's so urgent right now. So it's one of those 4.
Thank you. And I think that you just kind of hit on, it's never just one dimension. Like we are so multifaceted, and sometimes it's the social, sometimes it's physically, like in our body, sometimes it's, you know, spiritual, mental, like it's the, you know, the imposter voice or something else, and sometimes it's just our community that isn't, you know, that's a part of our community but not related to the aspect of the entrepreneur aspect of our community, right? So we all have multiple intersecting identities, and some of those identities are visible and some of those identities are not. Some aspects of our identity are spiritual, some of them are, you know, where we were raised, maybe even regional kind of variances. And then there's some aspects of our identity that we can't hide, and that sometimes society makes inferences about us related to that. So I'm curious, I'm sure all of you have, but if some of you would be willing to share, if you have an experience related to your identity showing up in a way that maybe challenged you because of how you were received, or an experience that you had, and how you had to overcome, you know, that experience.
I can start again. Yeah, so when it comes to your identity and my background, I've always kind of felt it when I was in school, since I was in school. So even as far back as being in design school, because I still feel, and I was going to design in California and Los Angeles, I still feel like design in general is pretty new within the Latinx community. And I've always kind of felt questioned by that. Because people understand art and artwork, but when it comes to design or engineering or designing for manufacturing, it feels very new within the Latino community, the Latinx community. So even trying to get a job or trying to get an opportunity, I always kind of felt I was being questioned in a subtle way through employers, through others that I showed my portfolio, because it's just not known to be strong in design for manufacturing. It's great for cultural aspect around art, for manufacturing machines, but when it comes to product design and creating a brand, I always kind of felt I was being questioned in a sort of way, like, why you, why this brown Latino guy? What makes you think you can create an apparel company? And what makes you think you can go and create a medical device? I always felt that I had to prove myself through the design skills when others didn't get questioned the same way. Just because they came from backgrounds or countries that are very strong in design and manufacturing. And I always kind of felt like I had to prove my ability through my work so that my cultural aspect wouldn't show as much.
Yeah, that resonates a lot with me because I'm in engineering, women, minority, so, you know, there's a lot of us out there. I think it's like a 3% or, I don't know, something underneath 3% of Latinas in engineering degrees, let alone like actually growing businesses and starting businesses. So yeah, it's always difficult to face new customers or clients because you don't know what the perception is, but I usually try to lead with my educational background. I lean on that a lot to be perfectly vulnerable. Because I have a PhD, then I can lead with the, oh, I'm Dr. Naya Zarati, and then there's all of a sudden this like heightened perception of having those 3 letters after my name. But during grad school, I was one of 100 of my peers in chemical engineering that were Latina and domestic. So it's always been interesting handling it and processing certain situations that come up where, like, is that offensive? Should I be offended? Oh man, like how is, because it's going to be negative to one person and that one person is me. So I need to create a narrative where it's not going to put me one down, right? Or like under. So when it happens, I usually just laugh it off outside of the context, right? Or process it with somebody else, a peer coach to process it. Other times it comes up, even now, I have flashbacks of like, wow, that really happened? Holy smokes. But then, I got through it and I'm here and I'm still moving forward. I work with military now, and that's always an interesting demographic, very homogenized. And with that, it's now, I feel like almost in some weird way, I've made it, because I'm hanging out with the majority, and to carve out a little place. So that's how I handle it.
Yeah, can I add to that?
Yeah.
If you're not aware of it, you can easily develop bad habits, especially when it comes to introducing yourself. Because I got so used to talking about my work and talking about my vision and what I want to do next with my company. And I thought, if I don't bring up the cultural aspect by the way I introduce myself, then maybe it won't come up in conversation. So many years of having to do that while in school or having a corporate job and then in stepping into entrepreneurship, I realized that that's really a bad habit and that's the wrong thing to do when you're trying to build a company and you're trying to ask or raise money because people want to know about you. They want to know about why you're passionate about what you're building and why you're so dedicated. And for me, it was really hard to talk about myself. So I would kind of just focus on what I was doing, and it felt like people didn't get to know me. And now it still feels very hard to talk about the personal journey about having a startup.
And Leo, hitting on that I think is really important because, you know, we all experience bias and you know, hate or, you know, microaggressions or aggressions and internalized trauma in really different ways. And sometimes we realize, hey, you know, I shrunk in a certain area because I was trying to make other people more comfortable. And the reality is I need to take up more space. So I really appreciate you bringing that in. Before this panel even started, I had a chance, I was mingling around the room, and I actually had 3 separate conversations with people in this room where they all were talking about like, hey, you know, I'm starting this new endeavor, but I'm trying to like, you know, not take up too much space. I'm trying to like, you know, be on the down low a little bit. And I'm just kind of like, nah, y'all should like, you know, throwing elbows, like take up some room, like you're in the room, you know? So I think that's really important. And because this is something that I heard from 3 people in the audience about, before I move on, I wanted to ask, you know, Paloma or Sylvia, if there's anything that you want to add, and then maybe we can ask the audience a little bit if there's some things that you want to hear from the panel.
Oh yeah. So when I've worked in a few different industries, in nonprofit and healthcare, where I never thought about my identity ever until I was told that I was too aggressive as a leader. And I was like, what? What are you talking about? And it was really hard to be like, what part of that is my gender? And what part of that is like a valid concern that I'm a little aggressive? But in men it's called passion. So, and I knew that oh, by the way, I'm an equity and inclusion trainer, so like I got my data, like I know my data. So that was hard. However, then I moved to tech, and in working with, my first tech job was at Etsy, which at the time, their engineering department was 96% white male. Most of them in their 20s and 30s, early 30s, so very homogenous and very new to me, where I was like, whoa, because nonprofit healthcare is not that. And that was really hard. I survived it. I found ways to make myself seen. I definitely had to relearn how to make myself bigger and just like show up. I had to like relearn body language, relearn a lot of like assertiveness skills. What's really cool about entrepreneurship, and I'm pretty sure it's one of the significant reasons why I like really dove in this time versus before when I kind of dabbled in entrepreneurship, was because I was like, I don't gotta answer to nobody. I don't have to convince anybody. I don't have to influence anybody. I don't have to convince bureaucracy and hierarchy of what, again, in tech was white men. I just do what I want. And it gave me so much freedom. So much freedom. I'm also not like VC funded, which I know is a whole other game. I'm totally like 1111 was fully funded through my savings. And like personal loans from friends and family. So that's really cool. Like that's possible to do, but I know that it'd be a different game. But it's been really cool that I get to show up, and now I have really leaned into the identity. Like similarly, though, like never in any business I've owned have I self-identified as like that I'm an immigrant, that I was undocumented the first 2 years that I'm being in the US. Like a lot of the identity politics I really have been parts of my beautiful 1111, like they have been part of our Instagram posts. What I get super pissed off about, you're gonna hear about it on Instagram. I'm curated, you know, when it really matters. And it has turned some people away, but really like showing up can be both like when you show up in a meeting, you know, like how you carry yourself, but it can also mean like how you show up on social media and how much of your story you include. And we've gained so many, like way more fans by showing up fully. And kind of mentioning more of the personal stories and stuff, or like talking about abuela. I think that when I like mentioned my abuela for the first time on Instagram, it was just like so like hundreds of likes telling that story, and I was just like, grandmas.
Yeah, we got you for that.
Paloma reminded me a lot about, and a little bit of Leo, of my life at Intel, as usually the only female in staff and the only Latina. And I was talking earlier with a friend today and how I would try to not take up space and not call attention to the fact that I was the different one. And I didn't understand a lot of the things that they were saying. I was sharing with Slade earlier today that they would talk in colloquialisms and things like circle the wagons doesn't mean anything to me. And they would speak and it would just like totally go over my head. And I didn't want to call out like, why are you even around the carts? And I'm like, I didn't say around the carts, I said circle the wagons. I'm like, same thing. Round, circle, wagon, cart. I still don't understand what you're trying to say. Or that if you give me 2 ounces of wine, I start talking like Sofia Vergara from Modern Family. So I'd make myself very small. And then I noticed that I was being ignored from all these other things that were happening. And I had to figure out ways to first kind of start to get in with the majority. I subscribed to all of the notifications on Sportacular for college football, and I followed everything. So on Monday morning, I could call and be like, did you see that touchdown by so-and-so? So then they started inviting me to get coffee at like the Monday morning pre-meeting. That wasn't actually a meeting, but that's when all this stuff was happening. And then the other thing is that I'm Colombian, and before Modern Family and before Narcos, the only thing people could remember about Colombia is Pablo Escobar and the drugs. And so I wouldn't mention that I was Colombian. I'm like, I'm Latin American. And then I would leave the Colombia part because I didn't want to get into like fight mode about drugs. And then thankfully, Modern Family happened. And people would ask you, oh, you're Colombian like that girl from Modern Family. And I'm like, yes, yes, totally am. And I decided to own it and did something that was very different, I guess, for my coworkers. I invited them over to my house to have Colombian food. And like, I don't know about you at work, but this is not something that people did at where I worked. And they liked the Colombian food. It backfired because then they wanted me to have Colombian food every single time, and I'm like, no, this is not gonna happen. And I decided to just really own who I was, be like super proud of my heritage and being an immigrant and being from Colombia. And if you wanna argue drugs, let's sit down so you have all the facts straight. And that has helped me in this side where I'm an entrepreneur, and I'm doing this for the Latinos in the US, and I want them to be proud, and I don't want them to be embarrassed to be speaking Spanish anywhere, and just really take up space.
Beautiful, thank you all. I want to turn to the audience. I have more questions, so don't worry, the conversation will keep going, but I do want to hear if there's anybody in the room that wants to follow up or ask a new question. We're real shy. Yeah.
Hey, are there any particular Latinx cultural figures or political figures that personally inspired you?
So I have a lot of inspiration from political figures that are Latina and Latinos, and also, you know, African Americans are like a lot of public figures that have inspired me to just push forward. I think also some of the classic political figures like Nelson Mandela and Gandhi, and like just this really pure cause. What am I trying to do, right? Because if you lead with a cause that's something bigger than yourself, you will always have energy for that particular, you know, passion or cause. So for me, it's just looking at their lives, looking at different biographies, and seeing how they push through the really hard moments to then find it within me or outside of me to just continue. Yeah, but I mean, not a single particular one. Yeah.
Sorry.
I have a quick one. When I grew up in Southern California, but completely surrounded by white friends. I think I had exclusively white friends, and never thought anything of it because they were like punks and I was punk, and they happened to all be like that. And it wasn't until I think I was 20, living in Seattle, I pretty much had lost most of my Spanish. It was just like it's really hard to maintain it if you're not like on it, because I immigrated when I was 8. And so I never thought anything about it. I married a white guy, all my friends were still white, and I went to see Before Night Falls. Anyone seen Before Night Falls? Go watch it. It is based on the novels and the biography of Reinaldo Arenas, who's a Cuban poet and died in New York of AIDS, but had this like bonkers life in Cuba. And it's a really beautiful movie. It's made by a white person, but it's really bilingual. And I went to the movie in Seattle with a bunch of like friends who were all happened to be white, and I was bawling the whole time. I was just bawling because it was the first time that I realized I'd lost a language. And what does it mean to lose a language? It means you're losing a culture. And it was like it was a very vivid. It's such a beautiful movie, but it's really beautifully shot. And it's supposed to take place in Cuba, but it's all shot in Mexico. That's where I'm from. And so I was just bawling. At the end of it, it was the first time that I realized, like, oh, I've been like kind of in denial or whatever, I don't know, about being Mexican. And I was 20 years old. It was very hard. And since that movie, really since that day, it's been me like reconnecting with family, with culture, with what's my version of Mexican. It's not gonna be my family's version of Mexican. Like all of that. And so it's less a person, though Reinaldo Arenas, I did go and read his books and they're beautiful, they're so beautiful, and really hard and painful. But really it was more like the movie and the sound and stuff, so there was a moment.
Thank you. So we are here, we're hearing about these entrepreneurs' experiences. Everybody in the room has a different experience. We're all gonna have different ups and downs. Some advice is gonna work, some is not. But sometimes it's helpful to know what's not helpful. And also to remember that everything here, I always say one size fits none. So take it with a grain of salt, right? And know that these are just some experiences, but I'd love to hear from people up here. What is one of the, worst pieces of advice you got? And what did you waste the most time on as a result?
So my answer is not going to be, the two are not related, but the worst piece of advice that I got, not once, twice, several times, I keep getting. Just wait for it. Because I have a platform and my goal is to inform Latinos in the US about political information and try to encourage them to vote. And I was trying to do this with a newsletter, and I will get to the second part of your question as to why I'm not doing a daily newsletter. But eventually I started doing video because Latinos watch more video than any other demographic group, like 66% more video than anybody else. And actually it makes sense that my personality comes a little bit better over video than over text, even though it takes way more production time. But I keep getting the advice that I need to show more skin, and that I need to not wear turtlenecks or sweaters, and that I need to dress with, oh yeah, I'm loving these faces that I'm getting. You need to have more cleavage and show more of your boobs for people to pay attention in your videos. And I'm like, no. Number one, I'm always cold. So if you look back through my Instagram, most of my videos I'm wearing like a hat, woolen hat, jacket, and turtleneck because I'm freezing and my house didn't have good insulation. We fixed that, thank you. But I'm not gonna show like boobs just so you pay attention to the news about political trials or whatever. And sadly, I keep getting that piece of advice, and I'm trying not to jump and attack people and be calm when they say this, and I'm like, I disagree, but thank you. I know you mean your best. And the thing that I wasted my time on a lot was, like I said, I was doing a daily newsletter. I was trying to be the Spanish Skin without being bitchy. And it just wasn't sustainable because it's just me trying to condense the news and then translate most of it and then write a newsletter on a daily basis. And that was a bad idea, and good advice that I got that I knew it was good advice, I just didn't know how to do it, was to make more evergreen content. So finally, I figured out a way to do that, and that's how I'm now producing pieces that are educational in the sense of it doesn't matter if you read my blog post about the student debt crisis today, next week, in 3 months. The data might skew a little bit, but it's not gonna be irrelevant 24 hours later, like my newsletters were, or my first videos. Sometimes I recorded the video and I turned off airplane mode and there was a notification, the Trump administration did this, and I'm like, there goes the last 30 minutes of my video. Forget it, I can't use it anymore. So I am definitely trying to do more evergreen content that can be used and repurposed longer and not obsolete within 2 or 24 hours.
Thank you. That's awful, by the way.
Man, mine's not that bad. It's so bad. It's so bad. Most of the advice I've gotten has been wrong. Yeah, I think unless you're like, yeah, it's all been wrong. But I think the one that was hardest was, and I felt really judged. It's funny which advice you kind of, why you hold on to it, why you want to listen to it is not about the advice, it's about something else. But another entrepreneur told me, hire only when it hurts. So like hire staff only when it hurts. And I really took that to heart. And it was so wrong. Because one, I don't believe that building a business should hurt. I think that's some weird old school grit. I don't know what that's about. There's no science behind that whatsoever. There's no data behind that. So that is a little masochistic. And two, when I decided to ignore, I was when we were super understaffed. I felt super, like my motivation dropped a lot, and that's all you have. Like you cannot let go of your motivation. You need to keep that up. And then I was like, never mind, I'm gonna ignore that advice. It was really hard to ignore. It was really fascinating how hard it was to ignore. I ended up staffing up. We had this team. We launched the store with this team, and my job, the launch, was beautiful. The experience was so fun. They made it joyful. It was exactly what I dreamed a launch would be, and it was because of them. So yes, did it take a lot more money? So much more money. So much more money. Would I do it again the same? Exactly the same. I would now, like I'm now just like, staff is everything, your team is everything. Especially if you're a verbal processor like I am, like know yourself, especially if you are someone that doesn't like to work alone for 8 hours a day, every day, day after day, know yourself. They're so awesome. Some of you met them. If you go to the store, you'll meet the team. Totally amazing humans.
Before anybody else jumps in, I just want to underscore, know yourself. I feel like because we're saying, everybody is going to have such a different experience, like, know yourself is really about looking in the mirror and admitting to yourself even the stuff that you don't want to tell yourself, right? Like, yes, I'm a verbal processor and that drives everybody around me nuts, but I need to find somebody where it works, right? Like, there are certain things about ourselves that sometimes it's hard to admit, and when you're growing a company or when you're trying to put yourself out there, it's like you gotta give yourself that hard love first, and you gotta fully accept yourself and fully reconcile kind of like and turn it into strengths, right? Because at some point in our journey, we were told, oh, you talk too much, or at some point in our journey, we were told, you're not creative enough, or and it was internalized, and that's why we won't admit it to ourselves. But I think that there's a really powerful aspect of somewhere along the way, I got embarrassed about this, and I'm going to turn it into a strength. I'm going to lead with this. I've had some of my greatest mentors who've kind of really put themselves out there have mental health struggles, and they led with that. They said, hey, I can't focus, and that's why I need you. And I was like, I can work with somebody who knows where I show up, where they end, where I show up. I know somebody who can, be that kind of vulnerable with me. So I just want to underscore, what Paloma just said about like really knowing yourself. But I know there's other folks that wanted to jump in.
Yeah, are we doing both good advice and bad advice?
Well, let's hold good advice.
Okay,
but
so bad advice?
But if you have a terrifically terrible piece of advice that you want to put in the room, I think we should just put it out there.
Yeah, I think the bad advice I received was don't start a business because it's a higher chance that it's going to fail. And I understand where that feedback comes from or that advice because you're looking at statistics and you're looking at data. But I always heard it like for me it was bad advice because of the internal feeling. Because it's like, no, I feel like this is my mission or my life purpose. I feel like this is my calling. Like I've designed something that can potentially help people, and by not doing it, I feel guilty. I need to explore this, and I need to bring this to life. And for me, it felt like bad advice because of that internal feeling. By not doing this, I feel like my spirit is dying. So I need to at least take that leap and attempt. Because if I look at the research and I don't try, it feels like torture. So that person couldn't understand because they don't have that feeling. So I had to quickly understand that it was maybe good advice for others, but bad advice for me.
With that gut.
One piece of advice that actually, bad piece of advice was put yourself on the market, see what you're worth. And that was an interesting piece of advice because, we are all invaluable. And we can't be bought with a number, at least that's how I feel. And also, I'm not really right now in a position to compromise my dreams and hopes for a number.
All right, let's bounce back though. What's the good advice? Again, recognizing that for some people it's good advice and for others it's not. But I'd love to hear if there was something that particularly, some of you have mentioned mentors, some of you have mentioned peers, some of you have mentioned community. So something good's got to be going on because there's some sustenance there. We want the goods.
I already shared earlier that really good advice that I got was to create more evergreen content. But also, really good advice that I got from Rick Giroxy, director of PI, the Pollen Incubator Experiment, is related to Paloma and know yourself and be authentic. When I was starting the videos, I was trying to be very neutral and poker face, and if you have seen me for the last 30 minutes, you can tell that I'm really bad at poker, and I'm very bad at holding back, because my face will say everything. I would suck with that guy from Lie to Me. Like, anybody can read what I'm thinking. And Rick told me to stop trying to please everybody and just be authentic and just stick to what I believe in. And this is exactly what Paloma said earlier about, okay, if you're pissed about something, come out and show it, and be more authentic. And since I did that, it just made me feel way more at peace. It's like, okay, I'm not trying to pretend something. I'm not trying to include a different thought just to keep things in a balance. because I'm a computer engineer, I'm a scientist. I believe climate change is real, and I'm not gonna bring the other side to try to pretend that it's not. So I'm gonna stick to what I believe in. And it was just such a weight lifted off my shoulders. It was delicious.
Yeah, I'll go. So good advice I received was a long time ago when I was fully involved with art. So before discovering design, I would do art, more like sculpture and oil painting. And the best piece of advice I got was through one of my art instructors. And what she said was, Leo, don't fall in love with your work, or don't fall in love with your art. And it was a painful lesson at the time because we would do still lifes, and one of them took me about 3 hours, and I felt it was beautiful. And then when she came around to review it, she said, okay, looks good. Now grab this rag and wipe it off, and then start over again. And that moment was a big moment of growth because it hurt so much. And to me, it was so beautiful and perfect. And she's like, no, here, grab the rag and wipe it off. And then tomorrow we're gonna start over again. And I resisted, and it was painful, and she watched me wipe it off and said, Leo, don't fall in love with your art, because the moment you fall in love with your work, you stop touching it. The moment you stop touching it, you stop improving it. So she said, when I'm teaching you how to paint, she said, fall in love with the process of painting. And I still apply that to entrepreneurship or my startup journey, because I received similar advice through other mentors and other founders say, don't fall in love with your product, because the product will change, it will evolve once on the market. Fall in love with the problem you're solving. So once you change your mentality and you fully focus on creating the best possible path to solve that problem for others, your work then becomes more of a service. And you focus on creating better ways to solve that problem that leads to better versions of your product. So now I focus more on the journey and then falling in love with the problem I'm solving.
That was beautiful.
That was very beautiful. I was like,
That was so beautiful.
new
Thank you.
t-shirt.
There was none. There's some businesses I started, much smaller businesses, where like nobody knew what they were just like, no, they were just like, okay, cool, and there was no advice. But with retail, everyone thinks they know it because everyone's been to many stores. And so this was the first time where I was like inundated with so much advice because everyone's an expert, which is technically not true, right? Like we all are expert consumers in the US. So there's a lot to ignore. But there was, in the beginning, I had a lot of anxiety around marketing, and especially digital marketing, because I don't have a really strong connection to social media. Like I kind of don't get it. And I had a lot of anxiety, and there was a social media manager that was in this like mastermind group I was in, who really picked up, without me saying that was the thing I really was the most scared of. She really picked up on it, and she was like, tell me more about this. And she was just like vomited all these words about like, social media platforms and digital marketing, and how am I gonna do this while launching a retail business? Like this seems like full-time work, and that seems like full-time work. And as she listened, she essentially just like listened to me for a while, and then she just had these two words, which was like, okay, cool, so fuck Facebook. And I was like, what? And she was like, from everything you're saying, you find some intuition and some connection with Instagram, and that's the only social media platform, correct, that you feel any connection and motivation to work with. And I was like, correct. Not Twitter, not Facebook, not like anything else. She was like, cool, fuck everything else, focus on that. And I was like, yes, but Facebook. She was like, shut up. Stop. Fuck Facebook, don't worry about it. You're gonna hate it. Only focus on that one. Dive into Instagram, really own it, really love it. And I walked away from that mastermind. It was like a boot camp, like a 3-day thing, just being like, I didn't do anything. So it's cool that people that listen to you have expertise and cut through all of that and give you permission to like follow your gut feeling. It's so cool. So yeah. By the way, still not on Facebook. I don't even know if who knows? I don't know. I don't think we are. We're fine. We're fine. Like it totally is growing fine. Yeah.
Or on Twitter.
Am I?
Yeah.
Cool.
Again, remember she has a team now.
Team. Someone else must have done some cross. I do not know. Cool.
All right, I want to crowdsource again. We've had a little bit more time. We've heard a little bit more. I can keep going, but
I have a question. How much pushback did you guys get from your own family members? Like not your new family members, but like the older generation of you guys. I mean, we know where we come from. I mean, I'm speaking from experience. It's a lot of I think they're unaware of situations and that you guys are facing, that you guys are trying to jump through. Like what adversities that you guys have to go through and trying to break it down to you guys as family members.
that's a really beautiful question. So generational kind of differences and family pushback, and did you encounter that? Leo, you very briefly talked about how you had to train your family how to talk to you, right? So there was a little bit of that, but this is a very real element. I know, as a first generation immigrant, like even going to college, my mom was like, "Mija, like, ¿por qué? Like, ¿por qué te vas a ir?" And I was like, I mean, it's just like 2 hours. It's like not that far. And she was just like, "No, mija, like, pero eso no se hace." And I was like, "But you brought me here. You brought me to America. You told me to be successful." So, and it was like really hard. I was like, I'm following your advice, right? And because it doesn't look like what success looked like in the home country or for your generation, it's really hard, and particularly like taking these kind of risks. So I love the question. Thank you for bringing that to the room.
Yeah, I can touch on that a little bit. So my father is an immigrant from Bolivia, and I'm first generation in the United States. A lot of my youth was very structured in the female roles and male roles, and that's very typical, I think, in South America and specifically in Bolivia. So I had a constant pushback from my father from a very early age of like, I want to mow the lawn. He's like, get in the kitchen. And and just like these little things. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna do the best I can with what I have, but also when I'm strong enough to push the mower, I'm going to push the lawnmower across the yard. And I've just constantly been pushing the boundaries of his expectations of what women can do. And I get a lot of, not pushback from him, but questioning, right? Like, are you sure you want to do engineering in undergrad? And I said, well, let's just give it a shot and see how it goes. And finished, and then applied to grad school. He's like, well, are you sure you want to do that? Like, maybe, see what's out there. But I did it and graduated, and now he's more like, you know what, I'm so proud of you. I trust you in all of your decision making. You're doing well for yourself. I'm really proud of you. But it took a lot of constant proving. And I went through my own personal struggles of trying to, my lowest lows, I called them. I called my father. I called my mother. And it's constant, because we're all going through our own process and evolution. Now my parents are at the point where they're like, wow, this is amazing. I'm learning so much from you, and it's really opening my eyes. So, it's just how hard do you want to push back, I guess. Yeah.
Oh, you're looking at me.
I don't know.
My
families are
No
hustlers.
pressure.
My families are hustlers. I come from a long line of hustlers, so that was not an issue. And I think of at least from Mexico, everyone we know has a side hustle, or 4 of them, or a main hustle. We just hustle. That felt very normal to my family. I've been hustling since I was little. I was doing any side job. As soon as I could, I was just doing side jobs. And by me, I mean like in second grade, I was like doing side jobs. I think the thing, so I was very lucky because when I said like, I'm gonna start a business, I'm gonna do this, they were just like, cool, okay, cool. The thing that I held back, I don't think I've ever told my parents is I held back from telling them how much money and risk I was taking, because they're all like small time hustlers, you know? Like, you know, like you make a few baskets and you go to a market and you spend $50 on like the market fee and like you see what happens. Not like you put $150,000 into a thing and see what happens, you know? So I think I wonder if I pre-anticipated that pushback and just being like, I'm starting a store, and he's like, good for you. And I was just like, it's gonna cost all my money and everyone else's money and all the money. It's gonna be all the money. And I'm gonna sell all this, everything. I think I never mentioned that. I was just like, I'm starting a store. And he's like, good for you. So,
were you afraid of letting him know that? Like.
yeah, I didn't want to know. I didn't want to know his opinion about it. Yeah. I still would probably not mention it. I'll wait until our third year, you know, and just be like, by the way.
Paloma sells erasable markers and highlighters, and that's why I give her all of my money. And you should too. My parents think I'm absolutely nuts, literally, and they just don't get it. Because my dad is also an engineer, and for him, success looks like you go to a company and you stay there as long as you can and then you retire. And I was on track doing that, and he was very proud. And then the engineer turns into political activist / journalist that goes on YouTube. Explain that. So he reads my content and watches my videos, but I do not share a lot of information or struggles or things like that because he just doesn't get it. Unlike Paloma, I didn't know any entrepreneurs or hustlers or anything. All of my friends and all the people that I know are corporate America people. So going into entrepreneurship, I was like completely alone trying to figure the things out, and thankfully I found organizations like Thai and Pi that existed, and it was literally because I was working out and somebody told me that they existed, because I didn't even know how you could Google, you know, I'm an entrepreneur, what do? I didn't know that incubators and accelerators, I had to look up those terms after I heard them from somebody. So, very good question. My parents are still wondering if I'm having some sort of early midlife crisis or what's going on.
Very early.
Very early, yeah, thank you.
That's a good partner here. I will also say that because there was like a disconnect with my family as well. Like I kind of did a little like Paloma did. Like I had a mentor who said, you know, your parents, you know, she said, I'm a mom, and what I worry the most about for my kids is just that I want to know that they're going to be okay. I want to know that they're going to, you know, not end up on the street and that they're not going without food, and I'd rather not know the details. I was like, really? And she was like, yeah, I don't want to know the details. I just want to know that my kid's fine. And she was like, don't tell your parents everything. And I was like, it's so important. It's like a risk. It's part of the journey. I want to share it with them. And she was like, just, you know, you can tell them, you know, I'm really proud, like, you know, I'm gonna open a store, but you don't have to tell them how much money you took out, right? She's like, and I think she's like, the fear is that in families where you talk about everything that you feel like you're lying, and she's like, you're not lying, but you're also don't need to tell them every detail. And I was just like, oh, okay. It introduced so much peace into my life. And my family, suddenly, I realized, like, even when they have questions, I just remind them how well I am doing. Hey, like, you know, I just got that massage because I can do that. Or like, you know, like, hey, like, I'm doing really well. I'm really happy right now. And calling them when I'm having those really high moments, because that's really like gold. you know, and I realized there's just some things that are generational and some things that mi familia like no va a entender. And the more I try to force it on them, it's almost like I'm trying to do the reverse. They're trying to force their beliefs and values on me, and they really want me to get it. And the more I want them to get me, I'm kind of doing the same thing, and I'm like, hey, you know what? Like, we love each other, that's good. So that's worked out for me.
For me, pushback from my family, no, not very much. They've been very supportive, and that actually was one of the deciding factors to go into entrepreneurship. And the way that happened, it was kind of strange. So I grew up doing art, and my parents, especially my mom, taking it and putting it on the fridge and being really proud. But for them, it's been hard to understand design. Even after I went to design school and started working in footwear, I would tell them I work at the headquarters where the shoes get designed. I help design them. And that didn't make sense to them. They would still introduce me to their friends as Leo sells shoes. And I'm like, no, I'm not in the store selling shoes. I'm helping make them. And like, Leo sells shoes. And they're like, okay. But it wasn't until design school, and I mentioned my dad worked in agriculture. So I created this concept, had a paramedic uniform stitched with his back support, and it had received a design award. So I had come back from design school, and I thought, oh, I always show my parents my work. I want to show that to them because it's going to get an award. So before I shipped it to Boston, where the conference was at, I showed it to them. It was in my brother's home, and I put it up on the table, and I showed them this is what I made, and I was so worried about what they would think. And even though I had already received a design award from the design community, and I was more worried about what they would think. And I remember showing it to them in the living room, and my dad especially got really quiet, and my mom was quiet too. And I was so worried about what they would think. And they looked at it like they hadn't looked at any other of my pieces before. This time it was different. And then I remember my dad looking at it and saying, okay. And I was like, okay, what? And he said, okay, I will help you. He said, I will help you sell this. Let's build it, I will help you sell it. And I was like, what? I kind of laughed. And like, this is a concept, I only have one, there's nothing to sell. And he said, I have friends that could use this. So you do what you need to do, but I will help you sell this. And at that point, this was in 2011, I felt like, okay, it's interesting. I don't know where to start. I don't even know how to build this. It needs a lot of work, but okay, at least I have their approval. Then I shipped it off, but those words I always felt really good to me. Like, okay, for the first time in my life, I think my parents understand what I do or what I want to do with this. So they worry less around me having a career where I can support myself, but now they worry more on how long it's taking. Because now, my parents, they wanted grandchildren, they want a child for me. And my siblings, it sucks that they still don't have children. Only one of my sisters does. And they want grandkids, and so now they worry, and it's not pushback, but they ask, when are you gonna be done with this? Are you almost done? Are you thinking about marriage? At least let us know that you're thinking about it. So it's not pushback, but it's just really, I can tell they're worried. So they don't worry about the career part anymore. They worry about my life, and if I'm building a life where I will be happy. Because even if this takes off and becomes very successful, I don't think it matters very much to me. I think building a family or keeping a family together is what matters most. Yeah, so it's like an interesting kind of situation to be in.
That's a very raw and beautiful story, and I really want to appreciate you for bringing that into the room. And you're married to the prototype, but I do believe, right, like you're kind of bringing in that like that generational element, right? Like there's some aspects of what the family just is worried about your well-being. And sometimes it, kind of complicates the holistic vision. I also want to say, I think too, when you said, that they would say you're a shoemaker, that kind of cracked me up because that's what, my parents do, and that's kind of, again, part of that generational divide is just accepting it and being like, hey, probably they just don't get it. I was working on a policy to help, create more financial resources for entrepreneurs in Oregon. And my mom was like, so what are you doing? And I was trying to explain it to her, and then she introduced me as an abogada. And I was like, what? She's like, isn't it an abogada? And I was like, I never went to law school. I am not a lawyer. And she was just like, pero mija, estás pasando leyes y andas con esa gente importante, And I was just like, whatever you want to believe. And it was that same friend that was like, let your mom believe you're an abogada. And I was like, but that's a lie. And she's like, your mom's really happy. Whatever, gets it done. She's like, but if you ever, she literally, my friend was like, but if you ever run for office, do not let anybody interview your mom. Because they're going to be like, she's had all these phony lives, she's lied to everybody, she lied to her mother. So, there's some give and take, but if you ever, decide to become a public figure, just check in with your folks. So I actually see some lights are turning off, and the night has grown later, and so obviously they were like, snap them back on. So I have one more question for the panel, and before I ask that question, I wanted to open it up to the room again to see if anything's come up for folks, and otherwise we can kind of jump in and then have time so that you can finish the pizza, have a little bit of time to mingle with them so that you can, maybe there's one person up here that you felt like, hey, that, I'm really navigating the hardship of being a woman and getting all this advice around my body, I want to have a little bit of time with Sylvia, just us, right? Or maybe it's I'm in retail too, and I can't stop people from giving me advice, and I just want to kind of bond over how ridiculous it is. So I want to make sure that you guys have a little bit of time afterwards, but I want to open it up to the room. Anything else that you kind of want to bring into the full room?
I'm curious if you've cultivated any business relationships that you found have really helped bring success to your businesses.
Yeah, so cultivating relationships that bring success to your business. You mentioned Rick at Pi. It would be great for the room to hear of others.
I would have to say local universities and my alma mater as well helped me a lot. The professors I used to work with, I still work with today. Also reaching out to Portland State University. They have a great center of entrepreneurship, and all of the employees there are more than willing to open up their doors to you, hear your process, and give advice and connect you with the right people. So it's free, and it's wonderful, and it's community.
Yeah, for us it has been very important. Mostly the incubator we're in, the Portland incubator experiment, Pi. Yeah, having someone like Rick that can be well connected and can make introductions, but most importantly, having a workspace, because we prototype and we make things. So having a place where your team can get around and build and review prototypes has allowed us to accelerate our process. But also making the connection with the universities, the ones here in Portland, that has been very helpful in getting interns, getting people to help along, finding biomechanical lab that can help with testing. If that wasn't available, it would just slow our process down so much. Also, as far as testers go, the local first responder agencies, the ones out in Tualatin Valley Fire, here AMR locally, just having industries and professionals where you can go and do focus groups and really learn how to solve for the problems that they experience has been huge. They've welcomed us and have been excited to have us go there and show them concepts and really understand them more. They really feel appreciated that someone cares enough to go see them and is willing to solve for the problems that they experience. I think those top 3 relationships have been huge for us.
I started the entrepreneurship journey, and I mentioned Pi, and the other organization is TIE, which is actually how I found out about Pi. TIE is a wonderful entrepreneurship organization focused on entrepreneurs, especially minorities, and they have an amazing boot camp that is 5 weeks long. Leo, I believe, was also in the boot camp, even though we were not there together. But you learn everything about starting your business, and you meet a lot of the instructors are lawyers and accountants and people that will teach you anything about the journey. And the lawyers, for example, were critical for me, that I met because of the Thai bootcamp, and that's how I ended up meeting Rick, that is the director of Pi. But other people that came and give us training are all in the entrepreneurship community, that you now, as you get into Twitter and get into the Twitter Portland entrepreneurship circle, you will see them giving advice or encouraging you and helping build community, and it's really useful.
Is it TI or TY? TIE. TIE.
TY is the youth version.
I knew someone had that question. Okay. I wish I'm sometimes a little bit too much of a loner, like a lone wolf, and so I'm actually learning like how to tap into things better. But one of the things that really helped me before there was a store, before there was a team, was an organization called Women Led. Anyone know Women Led? Women Led. They're so great. They made me feel connected without having to try so hard. You sign up. If you get accepted, it's super affordable. It's like $50 for every 3 months, and you get every week. You have like a group of 4 to 7 other women who are entrepreneurs, similar journey where you're at, and you just check in every week. The rigor of that and like this consistency of it, and the people that I've met there were really critical. And in particular, speaking of know yourself, I knew that I needed a touch point because it was so conceptual at that point. You know, that phase where you're at where it's just like, it's so conceptual, it's too conceptual. And that was the first time when I started going to those Monday meetings that it stopped feeling so conceptual, and it was just in my head, and it was just like, this is real things. I talk about it with people I read. So that was cool. There's recently, I've been connected with something called SCORE, just like a scorecard, SCORE. It's also a city program where they connect you with a mentor specifically about a thing that specifically you're asking about, and mine was accounting, because I was like, oh man, things are getting crazy. It's no longer working to just do it alone. And I've only met with them once, but it was so amazing to have someone that's been in retail, deeply understands retail accounting, which is its own universe. I was like, whoa. So I'm actually just now, a year and a half into it, being like, okay, I gotta block time every other week to reach out and have coffee more regularly. Not just people who seek my time, but like I need to be proactive, because otherwise I may not get that mentorship. It's not, it takes investing time in. So I'm starting now. If you have any recommendations, let me know.
Yeah, I guess just to add to the pool of what's already been put out here, particularly for makers, Built Oregon is, I found a really amazing platform to even help you get in touch with retailers so that you can kind of get a 3-week shelf at New Seasons, or kind of get some entry points. So and if you're just interested in learning more about them, they have the Built Up Festival every year, and it's coming up I think in like a month or two. And Mitch Doherty's kind of who's behind that, but I've also found some really amazing resources online, kind of like you said, like if you don't have time to it's easy for me to follow people on Instagram. There's an organization called Sister Is, and it's basically the fundamentals on how to build a feminist business, and it's like, men, you can build a feminist business, and it is really just about, I love, they kind of drop different principles on a regular basis, like, a feminine economy is generous, it's not about competition, right? So just dropping things on the regular that I have found to be kind of cornerstone values that I think are things that I can take in bite-sized pieces. But definitely a strong community in Portland, and I think that collectively we could populate it more. So I want to wrap up. So in one breath, my role is, we're not going to go on, so if you can't finish it in one breath, you've gone too far. How can everyone in the room support Latinx businesses?
I would say to come out to events like this, but also make introductions. Because I feel like we're out there in different subgroups, and a lot of times we don't know. It's strange, but we don't see each other enough. So if you find someone, like pull them into a community or make an introduction, I think that'd be huge help.
Similar to Leo, connect the dots and share the love.
Yeah.
I would say to really support the Latinx community here in Portland specifically. Is that the question? Yeah, Portland specifically. We need to work together in creating spaces where not only is it Latinx, but it's everybody enjoying the cultural immersion of what it means to be Latinx and just coming together as a community and really giving us our elbow room and and room for us to shine fully.
There's a new magazine, Mercados. I don't remember saying it. We have it at the store. It's free. I think check that out. Go to one of those businesses once a month. Make it a date night or friend date night. There's so many amazing businesses in there. It's at the store.
Also, Prosper Portland has the Mercatus directory online, but check it out. It's amazing. So to kind of wrap up, some of the stuff that we heard today is really about listening to your gut, echándole ganas, right? Like putting it all in there. We heard some healing hacks. I think, you know, they were simple and small and things that we can kind of test out different times in our journey. One of the biggest pieces that I feel like I'm really going to walk away with is bring your whole self. And authenticity is actually what generates the greatest following and the greatest support. Trying to be too many things to too many people see through that. And when you just kind of put yourself out there, you're gonna find the people that you want to find, right? You're gonna find your true buyers, true followers, true supporters. Fall in love with the process and with the problem that you're trying to solve. I really feel like, you know, we can all be on a different journey, whether we're artists or scientists or, you know, engineers or whatnot, but I felt like that was a true north compass that we kind of put into the room. Abuelas, help yourself stuff, right? Like humor, like insert humor, and comunidad, I think was a big thing. Like community kept coming up over and over again. So thank you for coming out tonight, for building community, for being with us, for supporting everybody on the panel, and yeah, eat the rest of the pizza. So thank you all so much.
Thank you.
I just want to take a second to, again, thank you all for coming, but especially thank you for being so gracious and wonderful and accepting my ask to participate tonight. Leo, it's been amazing watching you grow over the last 2 years. Paloma, I'm so happy to have met you. Naya, I'm so excited to know you. And yes, stop leading with your PhD. You did it to me. Sylvia, I'm so glad that I have had the chance to become friends with you, and thank you. And Janet, I'm looking forward to getting to know you better. It's been wonderful. Thank you for sharing such intimate stories and being a part of this.
And thank you, Tammy, for creating the space and the opportunity. Because we talk about it, we don't get to see each other enough. And events like these and stories like these are oftentimes missed or overseen. So thank you for creating a space and opening your doors to us.
Let's make it real.